G'day folks, and welcome to this introduction and overview of Stalingrad 42, Southern Russia, June-December 1942. This is a design by Mark Simonich, published by GMT Games in 2019. Now, many of you will be familiar with Mark's sort of 1940 series of games, featuring Ukraine 43, Ardennes 44, Normandy 44, Holland 44. You can also include the Caucasus campaign into that, which is very similar. They all share similar characteristics in being IGO-UGO systems, sticky zones of control that use this, what's become a fairly famous ZOC bond or ZOC bond system, which is basically where two friendly stacks of units create a ZOC bond between them that prohibits enemy movement into that area. So you can move ZOC to ZOC, but you must then stop. But you can never move into a ZOC bond area. And it creates a very interesting dynamic throughout this game series where it enables you to focus on stronger defensive stacks on defense, and on the attack it gives you greater challenges in terms of deciding when, where, and how to attack. Throughout many of the games in the series, attacking factors and defense factors are limited. In Stalingrad 42, you're limited to 40 attacking factors, and on defense it's limited to 20. And this is after all modifiers for doubling and all that, and halving is taken into account. Now, Stalingrad 42 runs from late June 1942, and the full campaign runs through until late December 1942. So it covers this sort of German offensive throughout Russia and southern Russia, Ukraine, out to, you can see Stalingrad out on the far right. There are some interesting characteristics of this game that sort of set it a little bit apart from some of the other titles. There are railroads in this game, and the Germans need to extend their rail lines. They can extend up to 4 rail lines, up to 2 hexes per turn. So they need to kind of support their offensives along those rail lines to push their sort of lines forward. There is rail movement, which enables reinforcements mainly to use these rail networks to get their reinforcements to the front fairly quickly. There are advances after combat, up to 4 hexes, and there is also breakthrough combat in Stalingrad 42, which is basically where you can form a breakthrough group of basically attackers that advance into the defender's hex, and that group can engage in additional breakthrough combat. So you can sort of get a bit of a steamroller effect going. There are rules for supply and rules for isolation and isolation attrition if isolated units are adjacent to enemy combat units. There is a very lengthy reinforcement schedule, and you see out on the right here I have all the reinforcement charts laid out to give you a sense of how many reinforcements there are in this game. These are partly the setup sheets in the center here, and then there are Russian reinforcement charts and German reinforcement charts up here. Now I've set up for the Vorblau scenario, which is basically an 8-turn introductory scenario, but it's pretty much the same setup as for the full campaign game. It runs from basically turn 1, late June, through until the end of July 1942. I mentioned IGO-UGO. It's basic, a pretty clear structure. You've got a movement phase where you move your units up to their movement allowance, and then you have a combat phase. There are rules for artillery support units, ASUs. There are a small handful of air units in the game, and they can also sort of assist your combat. And then there are also rules for armor shifts, and units with a black dot next to their combat factor provide an armor shift in combat, such as this unit here. Now that can be on the attack. You've got a black dot. It's a shift for you. If the defender has a black dot, it's a shift for them. and they can effectively cancel each other out if the attacker and defender both have those black dot armoured units. But there are also, the Germans have red dotted armour units, and these are elite armour, which gives them an additional armour shift. There are also anti-tank units spread throughout the map, and they cancel those armour shifts on defence. I can't see any quite easily, but they are there somewhere. What else? Okay, so you've got fortified positions as well. There are on-map starting fortified positions along the front. You can also, both sides may construct additional fortified positions which provide additional column shifts in defence. What else? Yeah, look, you've got various sort of retreat rules and sort of considerations to make. Units may become disrupted. They may be placed in full retreat. There are rules for variable replacements to be placed on the map. You can see units taking replacements can't engage in combat and move a maximum of 1 hex during the turn they take replacements. That happens at the very start in the initial phase of the turn. The weather is mostly clear throughout the first half of the game, but then it begins to become a little bit variable. You'll have early fall where you'll roll and there may be some overcast. Then you'll have deteriorating weather. You may get some rain, and then late in sort of November through to December, there's the chance of snow affecting conditions as well. It's ultimately a struggle for victory point objectives. You can see all these little objectives throughout the map. Stalingrad is divided into 2 hexes, and they're worth a total of 5. You can see Rostov here is worth 2, and there are a lot of little 1 objectives spread around the map as well. There are quite a few down in the southern half of the map, so this is where the Germans set up, and this is where their offensive begins, but all things going well, they'll eventually, hopefully, push down into the Caucasus region, down here, where there's a lot of mountains, alpine areas, and a lot of sort of packed in victory point markers. Particularly the exit to Baku is worth 3 VPs. If the Germans can exit 5 divisions. Grozny is worth 2. There's a lot of 1s in this far southern area as well. So it shares a lot of those similarities with many other games in Mark's 1940 series, with I guess a couple of other little flavour rules, which gives it a bit of a distinctive feel for this scale and this fighting. In terms of the units, you are mainly dealing with, there's a lot of divisions out here on the map. There are a few corps, and there's the occasional brigade scattered around as well. But most of these, you can see here, division. Most of these are divisions, and as I sort of scan my eyes, I can only see divisions, but I do note on the reinforcement schedule there are a few corps. I can see brigade as well. So there's a couple of corps and brigade in the game. The hex scale is about 10 miles across. There are, it looks very white, so there's a lot of that clear terrain, but there are some important terrain effects, as all summarised on the terrain effects chart. Rivers play a major role. The Volga River in particular, there's a lot of lake hexes which block movement. You've got sea control down here, the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. You've got sort of a scattering of marshes. I pointed out those mountains and alpine hexes down in the south. A lot of these marsh hexes alongside rivers. There are some seasonal marshes as well. Minor cities and major cities play a pretty important role in effectively doubling the defender's strength. So that'll be key sort of defensive areas. There's woods, rough terrain, wooded rough terrain, which sort of may provide column shifts. There is, of course, determined defense rules, as with many of the other titles in this series. And what else? that pretty much covers it. So it's a pretty. There's a lot of those sort of battle-specific thematic rules to kind of give this a sense of distinction from those other games in the 1940 series. The same underlying system, as I said, I go, you go, movement, combat, CRT, and so forth. Incidentally, there is the CRT. Nice, interesting, dynamic combat results. I really like Mark's CRTs in these games. Gives it a kind of, it's not just a DR, it's a DR1 or D1, DR4 exchange results. Very interesting and different combat results, which really, it gives a bit of flavour and keeps things interesting. So folks, I'll be running through this, so stay tuned. It is, of course, Stalingrad 42, Southern Russia, June, December 1942. Thanks for watching.